Oh hey guys, let's make our electricity glow. So we've been animating this lightning bolt that loops, much unlike a lightning bolt. And we want to make it look glowy because it's made of energy, it should have some glow to it. And there's a few things I want to talk about relating to making a glow effect that's going to go in a game. Now a lot of people, they would just paste a glow on there and it feels really nice and glowy in the image, but then when you put it in the game it's kind of blown out and it looks weird. So I'm going to share some techniques that I use to add just that really nice touch that's going to get it not feeling all blown out and cartoony, but still sort of like it's a source of energy in the world. So the first step is to convert every frame into a movie clip. So that's a pretty straightforward process. You click on the frame down here and then you hit F8. Make sure you drop down here set to movie clip. Say OK. Go to the next frame. And I like to just keep one finger on F8 and one finger on the Enter key. So I click F8, Enter, click F8, Enter, and so on and so forth. Let's get all these converted. Alright, so I'm only going to worry about this first frame. So make sure you've got it inside of a movie clip. Now you'll notice if I go inside, there's only one frame here on frame 1. Go to frame 2, it's in a separate movie clip, right? So the reason why I make each frame its own movie clip is because movie clips don't play well with animation, and so each frame has to be its own movie clip. I can't put all of them inside of one symbol. And movie clips are the only way you can get a glow in Flash. So if you come over here to the Properties panel, under the Filters drop down at the very bottom, you'll see Add Filter. And I want to add a glow. Now by default, you get this really crappy red glow, which you can kind of see. If I change my stage color to white, you can see how it's glowing red around the outside edge of my movie clip. First thing I always want to do is set this low quality to high. That's instantly going to make it look better. Supposedly high quality renders more slowly if you export to a Flash movie, but for this case I'm not exporting to Flash, I'm going to export to a Flipbook template. So I can come up here and I can set my blur to, I don't know, 10. And then, oh, if this is locked, by the way, they'll both change, the X and the Y. See that there? I had it unlocked, but you just click on that guy there. And so you can have it blur sideways, or you can have it blur up and down, which looks kind of cool. Kind of like that. It's fancy. Maybe we want just a little bit of sideways blur. Yeah, something like that. Alright, so this is where you start thinking about clipping. And clipping happens when this blur, if I zoom in here, whoa, I zoomed in too close and it broke. But you see how this fuzz kind of hits the edge right here, and you might say to yourself, doesn't matter, no big deal. You would be surprised in a video game when you've imported this animated texture in how this fuzz, this fuzzy light glow is going to clip, and you're going to see a hard edge because the texture in the game is going to end right there, but the glow is going to go up to it. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to take my strength right here and crank it up. I'm going to put it up to 2000. So you can see here how the glow is overshooting. And for my purposes, I usually like to put the blur up pretty high. Let's put this up to 40 in every direction. Now I notice something very quickly, and that is that I have a bigger problem on the sides than I have on the bottom with this clipping issue. So I'm going to need to scale it down. So if you turn on Edit Multiple Frames, and you grab this bar here, I can hit Control A, and then hit the Q button to bring up the transform. So I've got every single frame selected, and then I can scale them. And notice what happens. This is where you start to realize you don't get much bang for your buck when you scale it down side to side because it's a very tall texture, but you have to scale it down really, really far, and there's all this wasted space top to bottom, right? So what I can do is I can use that space here And then when I import it into my game, I can actually scale it to whatever length I want in the game, right? You can change how long that card is and how skinny it is, in most game engines anyway. So I'm not too concerned about distorting the proportions. And that's another big reason why, you remember back before I made some of these lines thicker, is so that I knew that I might stretch it out and those lines might get really, really thin. Okay, so that strength is up way too high. Let's change it to 200, to 220. All right, that's starting to get a little bit better. This is the really, really soft glow. First off, I want to change the color before I forget. To like a blue. There we go. This is like really, really soft. I want this to feel nice and faint. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it feel like it's sort of ambiently casting a light out into the environment. It's nothing too harsh. Let's try 100. Oh yeah, that's feeling better. I could probably go even more subtle than that, down to 50. Yeah, that's perfect. See how it's just barely tinting it blue? What's interesting about this is if you change it back to black, which is what the final product will be that I export, you can't even see it. It doesn't even show up really much at all. But the really cool thing is if you make this a certain render mode in the game, it'll bring out just that little bit of blue, and it'll be almost like kind of subconscious to the player. But they'll notice they're like, ooh, there's some rich color there. Like, what's happening? And they'll like it. You'll see. All right. So, cool thing about Flash is I can add more than one filter. I'm going to add another glow. This glow I'm going to keep in tight. First, I want to set this to high. And whatever you do, don't make it the same color as your previous glow. You want to introduce something called color depth, which is where you play with the hues, where maybe one's a little more blue, maybe one's a little more towards the purple end, maybe one's a little more green. I don't know, we'll play around with it. Let's leave the smaller one blue and make the bigger one a little more pinkish purple. There we go. More purpley there. Now you see what that does. It adds that variance of like the hard blue edge meeting up with this more pinkish color. It just adds that nice gradation of hue. All right, let's make this not so harsh. That's like almost like an outline there. Make it a little further out. Maybe, no, 10's too far. Maybe more like 7. I'll bring this guy down to 50 as well. Notice that when you adjust the blur size, the strength, even if it's small, still keeps it pretty dominant here. But if I crank up the blur size, then the strength has to crank up with it in order for it to stay opaque and dominant. Oh, I didn't have these locked. Well, let's see. I want to do the X 5, and let's do the Y on this 10. Yeah, it's just a little bit of motion blur top and bottom. You could probably even go further with that. Maybe 20. It's kind of fun. That gives it the feeling of elongating it even more, so it kind of stretches it out. See how the blur's a little taller up on top and a little skinnier on the sides? Yeah, you guys can fiddle around with those settings even more. All right, so then I come back in here and I'll add one more glow. And this one, I'm going to set to inner glow. This option right here at the very far bottom. I'm going to move this guy up in order. You can grab these groups and slide them around, and it does matter what order they're in, how they sort. So I move this up to the top, so now it's up on top. But you see if I move it down, then it kind of sorts behind. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's kind of confusing. If you play around with it, kind of get what I mean. Anyway, inner glow. Okay, put it up on top. So the inner glow, I want to leave these thick parts with a white center, and then as it tapers off, I want it to color in. And for this, I'm going to go more towards green. I'm going to go more in this aqua kind of direction. So it's pinker on the outer fringes, but then it fades to this nice cyan color in the middle. Cyan's one of my favorite words. So maybe that's a little drastic of a color shift. I don't know, maybe a little more light blue is more appropriate. It's still pretty drastic, isn't it? Maybe this is the guy that's so drastic. I can come up here and click the color wheel to select something a little more. And then I can add it to custom colors over here so I can remember that dude. Okay. Yeah. A little lighter. Yeah, lighter. Okay. So we got this nice light color in here, and you see it's getting darker in here. It's just gonna fade that out, but then it comes into the center and it lightens up. It's good. It's really saturated. Maybe I don't want it so saturated, so I can maybe bring that down quite a bit. Yeah. Saturate it in the glow and then leave the center a little desaturated. Feels kind of nice that way. All right. Next filter I want to add, if I create a new filter here, is my blur. Now the blur, I'm going to put that one up here at the top too. Click on that and drag it. Set it to high quality, of course. Leave these unlocked. I'll leave the blur Y at 5, but blur X at 0. What this is going to do is add even more motion blur, top to bottom. See how it's fuzzing out like that? This adds a nice compositing effect that just is going to help marry it to the game world. It's not going to feel like a cutout drawing that you put in the game. It's going to just feel a little more like it belongs in that world, and it's not just like a poster card. Unless, of course, you want a hyper cartoony style, that's fine. But to make it feel a little more believable, adding that blur on there is going to make it really nice. So we've got this going on. Let's check it out in black. Yeah, there we go. So now it's got, you know, this nice, very subtle. I mean, if you zoom way in, oh, don't zoom too far in, you can see how the colors are shifting around, right? Like it's like white shifting into that bluish, and then it's like burning off on the edges into this nice purplish color, this nice violet color. I could probably make it more drastic, but you get the idea. I'll let you guys play around with it and see how it looks in game versus on the card. Okay, so I click on my object here, and I want to get this on all the other frames because all these other frames are, oops, let me change it back to black. All these other frames are still normal, right? See the difference there, by the way? Just appreciate that for a little bit. Compositing, you can see the glow. Like when you go between one or another, you can see the very subtle glow that's around there. It's nice. All right, all I have to do is click this clipboard button here, and I say copy all, and that will copy my blur and my 3 glows. Then I go to frame number 2. I do edit multiple frames. I don't want to select that first frame because I don't want to paste my filters onto that first one again. I do Control A on the keyboard, it'll select everything. And I need to type V to make sure I have the select tool activated. If you didn't before, that'll make it so the right options show up over here. And then click the keyboard and click paste. Ooh, that looks cool, right? And you can see how those pinks are adding up together, and a similar thing is going to happen in your game. If all of your different particle textures just have a little bit of that purple in them, you can see how they add on top of each other, right, to create this nice and rich color depth. It's actually pretty cool. Let's just admire the coolness for a minute. All right, go Flash. Turn off edit multiple frames and save out my scene, and now I can test it out, and I see that I have my electrical lightning happening with the nice, oh so subtle glow on it. And now I'm ready to throw it into a flipbook. If you guys already know how to make flipbooks, you can just end the tutorial now. I hope you learned something, etc. But for those of you who maybe want to know how to turn this guy into a flipbook, I'm going to show you. Alright, so I got all these frames, So step one, I can either click on this layer to select all the frames, and then I can right click and say copy frames, or I can click and drag when nothing was selected, and then right click and say copy frames. If a frame is selected and I click and drag, it will merely move that frame. It won't click and drag a selection. So you got to start clicking and dragging on a frame that is not selected. Right click, copy frames. Somehow my library window disappeared. I don't know if you guys noticed that before. That's under Window Library. It's back. Hi, library. I'm going to create a new symbol. So in the library panel, down on the bottom left, there's this new symbol button. Click on that guy. Call this one Flipbook. Real creative. You do not want this to be a movie clip. That's critical. It needs to be a graphic symbol. If you're not familiar with the differences, just trust me for now. In time, you'll get it. Movie clips are great for glows. Graphic symbols cannot do glows, but they're excellent for making flipbooks. Say OK. Now I right click here. Now, when I hit OK by creating it here, it put me inside of the flipbook symbol. So I'm in scene 1 flipbook. You can see up here. If I go back out to scene 1, the symbol I created is nowhere to be seen, except it's right here in my library. You see that guy flipbook? If I want to get back inside of it, do not double click on the name. That's wrong. That'll select the name. Double click on the icon and you'll be inside of that symbol again. Scene 1 flipbook. If I right click on my blank frame here, because there's nothing in this guy yet, I can left click on paste frames and I've got my frames inside of my symbol. Whoop, whoop. Next key step, go back up to scene 1. I forgot something earlier that I should have done. Draw my box. Let's see, how big is my stage? It's 128 by 512. R brings up the rectangle tool, which is this guy here. I'm on a separate layer here. If I double click on the fill, it'll select the fill and the outline. And I set this guy to 128 by 512. If this is locked, it'll do weird things, like changing one of these will change the other one. So it needs to be unlocked to get it just right. Okay, double click on your shape, make sure it's aligned to the left and the top perfectly. Aligned to stage checked. I can now click on the fill and delete it. Hope you guys are still with me. Alright, here we go. Double click on the line. Let's make the line some other color. I don't know. Green is so jarring. Light blue. Now let's just make it white. I digress. Okay, so now I can click on this layer here, which selects that guy for the whole duration. I can right click, say copy frames. See where I'm going with this, right? Go inside of my flipbook here, create a new layer, and if I right click here and paste frames, you'll notice it went too far. That's because, if I hit undo, it pasted it in here, inserted it wherever I have it selected, and all these blank frames here got nudged out over here. Bonk. So what I need to do is click on the layer which selects everything. Then when I right click and paste frames, it overwrites the entire timeline. That is the entire section of the timeline that I had selected with the frame that I copied. Cool. Now I'm ready to put this guy into action. Action. Alright, so let's create a new layer and we'll call this guy our Flipbook. And then I'll hide these two. I'm guessing the texture is going to be 512 by 512. Now I go to my library. So yeah, I changed my stage size here, 512 to 512. Drag this Flipbook out. Alright, so I need to resize this dude. Make sure that this is now locked. And I'm going to set it to half the height of the stage. 256 is half of 512. So now I can fit 16 of these in 2 rows. 8 columns, right? 2 times 8 is 16. So with this guy selected, I can align it to the stage, make sure that's checked to the left and to the top. Now, if you hold Control and click drag, and I think it's Alt and click drag on some versions of Flash. So if holding Control and clicking dragging doesn't do this, then do it with Alt. So I want how many of these? 8. How many do I have? 6, 7, 8. Control A will select all of them. I want to distribute these guys horizontal center. Bank. And then I want to align these guys to the top edge. Bank. Remember again, the align to stage. And that just makes sure that they're nice and evenly spaced across. Next step, select all of these dudes. And now Control drag, and it will copy all of them. You can also do Control C and Control V, by the way. And then if I have snapping turned on, snapping turtle, I can drag from the corner, just anywhere, clicking anywhere near the corner works, and it will snap to that other corner, and I got my 2x8 flipbook layout. Now I'm going to select everybody again. And I'm going to say, under looping, I'm going to say single frame. So now every single one of these is going to hold on frame 1. So you'll notice now when I scrub through my animation here, nothing's animating because they're all holding on a single frame. This is going to be my frame 1. This next guy to the right is going to be frame 2. And this guy is going to be frame 3. Notice that they're changing as I'm changing the frames. 5, 6, 7, 8. Down here we got number 9. We got number 10. We got number 11. Number 12. Number 13. And number 14. And number 15. And number 16. Now, you do not want this white box on your flipbook, right? So each one of these is an instance of the same symbol. The same animation in all of these. They're just displaying a different frame of that same animation, right? So if I double click inside of any one of these, doesn't matter if I go into frame 1 or frame 13. See, this one just put me on frame 13 when I came into it on my timeline. If I can double click back out, and I can go into any one of these I want, and they're all the same object, just different frames. So I go into any one of them, and I turn layer 2 into a guide layer by right-clicking on it and saying guide. And there you go. Now when I go back out to scene 1, there's no borders. Now if I hide my flipbook layer, I can always reveal my animation layer, and I can scrub through and see that guy. But you know what's even better? Because these are all out here on my stage. If I make edits here on my stage with the glow or whatever, it's actually not going to update my flipbook. Do you see why? Because this one symbol here actually contains a copy of the frames that are out here on my stage. So if I want to make edits to the symbol on my stage that show inside of the flipbooks, I have to copy this guy, create a new layer, hide that flipbook layer, and paste him. And then I'll go to transform and scale him up to 100% size again, so he's nice and big. And now this guy I can click on, and I want him to play. I don't want him to hold a single frame. So there we go. Now, if I make changes inside of this guy, like let's say, for some weird reason, I wanted to add a red smudge on frame 9 and a smiley face on frame 4. And then I go back out to my stage, and I hide that, and I show my flipbook layer. Notice that on frame 4, there's a smiley face, and on frame 9 there's the squiggly mark. Obviously you wouldn't want to make those ridiculous edits. But that's basically what we're looking at here. And now if I go inside of here, you can see those same edits that I made in the instance that was solo on its own layer. And I can go and delete those. I cannot click here and delete it because that guy is out on the stage. You see, I'm down inside of the flipbook. In order for me to see that red squiggly, I have to go to the frame that it's on, and then I can edit it up here in the instance that I'm inside of. I know, it's confusing, it's weird. Being an effects artist requires left and right sides of the brain. I hope I explained it in a clear enough way. I'm probably going to cover it again in another tutorial because I get a lot of questions about symbols and how they work in flipbooks. I know it's confusing and I'm sorry, but I'm going to delete that for now. We're going to call it good and we're going to call it finished. That is how you make a lightning bolt. I hope you learned something.